You're listening to the Vint Wine Podcast, where you'll hear interviews and stories from around the wine world. From writers and critics to winemakers and sommeliers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping wine culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint Wine Podcast, a production of the Vint Marketplace, your source for the top wines and spirits in the world at vintmarketplace.com. As always, I'm joined by Billy Galanko. How you doing, Billy?
Doing very well. I'm excited for our episode with our first Alsatian producer on. It's our interview this week.
Yeah, one of the few French wine regions I've been able to spend a little bit of time in. I think, actually, I forget which town it is over there, whether it's Aiguachime, if I'm saying that right, or Colmar. One of them is what they use for the inspiration, as the inspiration for Beauty and the Beast, I think.
Oh, very interesting.
Little towns out there. They're cool. It's a neat region, neat area.
I've always wanted to go taste. We were supposed to years ago, but one of these days.
Makes it, if you're doing the whole Champagne to Colmar or anywhere in that region, and then you can do some skiing on the backside, just head on down to the mountains after that. So it's a good little eastern side of France trip to take.
Oh, yeah. Super, super fast train from Paris as well.
Yep. Super excited for that later on in the episode as we talk to Jean-Frédéric Hugel of the Hugel family, who has been in that region since the 1600s, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, really excited to dive in. But first, let's get to a couple pieces of the news for this week from the weekly Vint Marketplace news. The first is an update that I wanted to share on the Constellation saga. I think we had touched on it before, talked about how they were closing up wine shop, and that is not exactly the case. They're not fully closing up shop, so I wanted to make sure we circled back with our listeners and got to the bottom of what they're really doing in terms of repositioning their wine portfolio.
Yeah, it seems like there's a move towards premiumization across the alcohol space, right? And I think that's reflected here with Constellation. Not that they didn't have some excellent, more like down market economical brands, but moving their portfolio to a place of really just retaining some of the premium names, the luxury names in their portfolio. Maybe smart long term. I'm sure they're better at wine business than I am.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. There has been a macro trend towards premiumization in the recent years. I think this might be something. They do have their fingers in different types of alcohol businesses. Beer is a primary one for them, and then also wine. And I think just the logistics and the efficiencies that you can find in wine are so different from these kind of larger volume wineries like Woodbridge and Meiomi that they've sold to the wine group, and some of the smaller ones like Lingua Franca that they're keeping. Even Robert Mondavi, the actual, like the core Robert Mondavi brand, not the private selection, which they've also sold. I think some of those bigger brands, they're able to find more efficiencies and work across a portfolio rather than having so different polar price point wines.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. Think of it as a blue chip stock, a blue chip holding company that has really made several brands into sort of larger than life household names. And so some of those are leaving their portfolio, but it's good to see especially some of the ones that we've even featured on our podcast, like Lingua Franca that you mentioned, still with that backing.
Yeah. So their portfolio now has a few Napa icons, including like Schrader. They also have Double Diamond. They have some wines from all over the world, including Kim Crawford from New Zealand, which I actually didn't know, and Ruffino from Italy. That'll still be in the portfolio. So still pretty diverse, but interesting. And just wanted to update everyone so everybody didn't go around telling their friends that the Vint podcast told them that Constellation sold all their wines. So that's that one. And then the other fun part of the news from this last week is actually something from personal experience recently. It's the extended, or I guess increasing use of wine globes as a aging vessel, not necessarily in place of barrels, but in conjunction with some of these other more traditional wine aging vessels. Have you ever heard of wine globes before?
I have not. I just did a Google. Are they glass?
Yes, they are glass.
Yeah, okay. Thought that was the case, but I didn't realize that they are kind of large, or can be kind of large.
Yeah, they're super cool. I was recently in Bordeaux, as everybody knows, when we were walking around, and I saw a few of these. When you're in a winery these days, people experimenting with other types of vessels for aging. You'll see like amphora, you'll see concrete eggs, and you'll see a few different things that are both used for fermenting and aging. And we kept seeing these like giant glass orbs with like little tops. And we talked a little bit about it. And these are just really unique vessels that they're exploring, both fermentation due to the fermentation kinetics, the way the wine moves around in these kind of globe-like settings, and then also just an aging method. It's obviously not porous in any way, and it produces a unique blending component for certain wines. And not only that, but they are amazingly visually striking when you're in the winery as well. They're just really aesthetically pleasing. Something I thought should get on people's radars, and they should start looking out for it when they visit wineries.
So they can be used during fermentation. Is that what you said?
Yeah, they can be used. They're vessels, so they can be used just like anything else, whether you want to like ferment. Like that's one of the perks of a concrete egg is the way it's shaped, the way the CO2 and everything runs through. It'll actually mix the lees around in the wine and kind of moves things around. And that's kind of a similar impact with the globes, they were saying. I'm obviously not an expert in these, but they're saying the kinetics, the way that the wine moves around in these circular vessels is something that adds a different mouthfeel and texture. And then the way it ages, being insular from every other component, basically it's free from air, but it's also not really interacting with the material of the container itself. It's almost steel in that way.
So they don't introduce any oxygen?
No, the only way oxygen would be introduced is through the bunghole. It's not like completely oxidative process, not oxidative, anaerobic, but it's less oxidative than say a barrel or even concrete.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at some pictures. It looks like there's something on the top to allow like manipulation of how much oxygen comes in, but maybe that's a different device. I'm trying to see here.
Well, so they have a thing. I don't know if you've ever seen them in barrels. Obviously, whatever is covering the top can allow air in at different rates.
Sure. Yeah.
But they have some of these things that would be sitting on top of barrels, and they almost look, I don't know, they have like little tubes, and you'll see a little bit of liquid in them. And that is put on the top with a rubber stopper. And then as wine goes through either fermentation or mallow, a little bit of that air or CO2 that'll come off will trickle up through that little rubber stopper. And when you have the little liquid in there, you'll see little bubbles in there. So that's one way people put that on top. And then over time, they'll see if fermentation is still going on because you can see the bubbles.
I see.
Yeah. So once they're not coming through that little thing anymore, you'll know that everything's settled. And then you'll know to check to see if it's completed everything.
Very cool. Yeah, if you're interested in learning more about that, you can go to Wine Globe. Well, it's a French site, so wineglobe.fr if you're searching here in the States, and they have a ton of information, tutorials, all kinds of stuff. Wine Globe. So very cool.
Yep. And then also the other one, Brady's all here plugging you into the other sites, but you could also go to the Vint Marketplace and read our little write up there, then click through to the other article that we linked as well. Well, with that, let's pivot over to our really exciting interview. First with Jean-Frédéric Hugel. The first thing that I've actually, and it might be because I'm getting old, but I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And it's cool that the last interview and then this one is with this new generation of winemakers. I've heard so much about this, but it's really, we're at that family inflection point where some of these people are taking over either from their fathers, was the case with Mikey over at Beaufrère. And then Jean-Frédéric, his whole family is basically seeing a generational turnover. And unlike Mikey, so that one was first generation, they're still trying to basically grow and establish a whole region. The Hugel family has been there for years, and he really emphasized, we've been here for centuries. We don't want to be the generation that's the first one to make bad wine. And I thought that was really cool to hear that perspective as we're moving forward.
Yeah, we saw that with Gaia as well on that interview, taking the reins from her father. Yeah, I would imagine after 13, 15, what was it? You said 16 generations, 13 generations of the Hugel.
I think he's the 13th, yeah.
13 generations, yeah. I could imagine some of that. Some things are probably much easier because you have many generations of, hey, this is how we've done it. But there's also maybe mounting pressure because, as we know, there are unique challenges to making and selling wine in today's world that maybe folks didn't face in the past and vice versa. So there's always new challenges, and yeah, you don't want to be the one to drop the ball. And they certainly are not the folks that we've featured so far.
Yeah, for sure. The estate was founded in 1639. So
Wow.
been there for many, many years. And part of this, you can listen through our full episode here, obviously, or go back and listen to our 5 questions with a winemaker too, where he talks about wines that they've made and he's gotten to taste that he has a benchmark for trying to make quality because they're still drinking wines from the 1800s and early 1900s. And it's cool for them to try to produce wines, even though it's predominantly a white wine house, that are meant to age for decades and decades, some even over 100 years.
Yeah, it was cool hearing about how they've not I almost said cornered the market, but solidified their sort of family and house style in the region, such that when you think of benchmark Alsatian wines, whether they be Riesling or maybe Gewürztraminer, like you have to go through Hugel to understand where the region has been over the last 400 plus years, right? Which I think is pretty cool that they have been able to maintain such consistency, quality, all these kinds of things. Mentioning, I think on our episode, wines in the cellar back to the 1800s, and some of them are tasting better than anything else in the portfolio, which is, yeah, pretty amazing.
For sure. They, like you said, I think you made a great point there. They are one of a handful of families that basically represents Alsace and is some of these names that you must know, and they basically embody what Alsace stands for. And for that reason, actually, is why they are also the Alsatian representative in the Primum Familiae Vini, which we talk about in the episode as well. It's actually how we got connected with Jean-Frédéric. And this organization is actually a group of family-run wineries that are basically trying to highlight how the best wine in the world can be made by family-owned and operated companies, and they don't necessarily have to be sold to larger corporations. And what this organization does is picks representative, typically one from a region, maybe a couple, depending on the size of the region, to represent them. So other members of this organization are like the Baron Philippe de Rothschild in Bordeaux, Joseph Drouin in Burgundy, Paul Roger in Champagne, Egon Muller in the Mosel, Antinori, the Marchese Antinori in Italy. You really have the who's who from these regions. So it was really cool to talk about what that organization and kind of group stands for. It's really just a symbolic representation of what family-run wineries and the quality that they can make through top European regions.
Yeah, fantastic representatives of what it's like to carry on a family legacy, not just of continuity within a family, but also just top quality wine, right? These aren't families we've been churning out an okay product for 400 years. They've been making some of the top wines in the world, not just in Alsace, for that amount of time. And if you want even more from Jean-Frédéric, you can listen to our 5 Questions with a Winemaker episode, where he talks a little bit more about things that they have going on in the pipeline over the next couple of years. And he also looks back at some of the best vintages to drink, in his opinion, which he cites wines, like I said, from back in the 1800s. And so also detailing project making orange wines, which is something we didn't touch on in the main episode. So go ahead and check out our 5 Questions with a Winemaker if you like what you hear from Jean-Frédéric. Before we get to this main interview, remember, check out our online wine and spirit store at vintmarketplace.com. There you can find all of the cult classics from Bordeaux to Barolo, as well as niche producers that your favorite somms are drinking. You can find wines from Alsace, for instance. It has one of the largest selections of inventory in the U.S., some of the most competitive pricing for enthusiasts and collectors. The Vint Marketplace is your go-to shop for stocking your wine cellar. And without further ado, we have the 13th generation leader of the Hugel family in Alsace, and that's Jean-Frédéric Hugel.
All right, we are here with very special guest, Jean-Frédéric Hugel. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we've never had an Alsatian producer on, and we've never had a member of the PFV, the Primum Familiae Vini on. Really excited to cover a whole bunch of really exciting ground today. Can you start with a little bit about your background, who you are, and then maybe a little overview of what the Primum Familiae Vini is and what you're doing for them at this moment?
Mm-hmm. So I'm part of the 13th generation of the Hugel family, who's been producing wine in the center of Alsace and being one of the benchmark for Alsace wine producers over the past 3.5 or just over 3.5 centuries, 387 years. which made us a candidate and the choice of the PFV Association to represent the wine region of Alsace. PFV being an association of family-owned winery that are representative of the major wine regions of Europe.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, let's dive right into the Primum Familiae Vini. Can you talk a little bit about what the organization stands for and why your wines fit so well in there? And then we'll dive deeper into your family's wines and the wines of Alsace in general.
The association started in the vineyards of Burgundy in 1992 when Miguel Torres and Robert Drouin were starting to question the speculative value of land in Burgundy and how challenging and actually more and more difficult it was for producers to inherit lands, basically, and to transmit their know-how, but also their ownings and their savoir-faire to the next generation. And from that simple discussion and from that simple fact that something needed to be done, or there was definitely a gap in knowledge between wine producers of how to properly transmit their companies, how to also interest the new generation, and how to preserve that incredible legacy that the European, but not only worldwide beach culture has. Basically, it started with the assumption that something needed to be done, just the statement that something needed to be done. And Robert and Miguel started calling some of their friends in the industry, some of the family companies that they knew, that they worked with through various distributions that they had met, the wines they drank simply. And this is also one of the natural the natural bind between all of the different families. We like and enjoy and drink each other's wines. We swap quality every year as well. But yeah, that was really the starting point. And the association grew to including every major wine region, or almost every major wine region of Europe, standing for the wine region, for their family, all family owned, which represent for us and the Vega Sicilia, the Barres family in Spain, the Senningtons in the Douro in Portugal, in France, two Bordelais, the Bamefil, the Rothschild, in Italy, the Antinori and Sassicaia, and Sotenitas and Guido, and Egon Müller in Germany.
Now, is it, maybe you said this and I missed it, but is it limited to only one family per region?
Yes and no. We consider the right and left bank Bordeaux to be two different regions. I think they won't disagree over there. It's a different mindset, but it's the one time where we have not actually two times because Antinori and Guido both have vineyards on the coast of Italy. But no, it's not limited to one per wine region, and then it's limited to 12 members. That was the statement to begin with. A case of wine is a 9 liter case of 12 bottles. So we limited the number of seats at the table of 12 members. And so we have that very prestigious 12 bottles, 9 liter case that we auction or sell 12 pieces of every year.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that it's a really beautiful curated case of, I guess, all the 12 top wines, basically from. It's a
beautiful object, and it's a very good start of a wine cellar, let's say.
I think so. Yeah, for sure. So maybe walk us through what are some of the other maybe like obligations or activities that everyone participates with together outside of obviously the really great 9 liter case and whatnot.
That's the beauty of it. There are no obligations. It's drinking the Rothschild that said we're not PFVs because we want to. We're PFVs because we want to. So it's all you have absolutely no obligations. You just have the pleasure of meeting several times. So we do trade shows and international wine fair events together. We're sharing costs, which is also part of the beauty of trying to be stronger together. We're not a big conglomerate. We don't have any financial interest between each other, but we unite to be stronger. I won't say against large conglomerates, because that's not the story of what it is. It's not about being against anyone. It's really about having a voice that needs to be heard. All family companies, most people think we're the dinosaurs. It's Paul Symington that said it very well. People think we're the dinosaurs. People don't realize that the most sustainably successful and the longest lived companies are family companies. The family companies that are being created today will probably outlive the new startups and the potential big conglomerates of the 21st and 22nd century. So it's very important to realize that in every economies across the world, the bedrock of most economies around the world is actually family companies and multi-generational companies.
Yeah, I think we're even seeing some of that here in the US with Constellation divesting some of the companies that it had acquired. So I definitely agree with that. Before moving on to talking about your company, you guys also do some scholarships, is that right? Or an internship program as well?
A scholarship, it's a prize. So every year we give out a prize with a financial help for a project for a company that is family owned, that has a particular set of skills, that has a particular competitive advantage that is absolutely unique, that has a particular expertise in craftsmanship. We're going to give away the third edition of this prize in a week from now, which means I cannot quite tell you the name of the winner yet. But yes, we give away a prize. The first one was to a luthier who's repairing and making violins. The second one was to Jean-Frédéric Hugel, which is a company that does some and revives some ancient breeds of sheep, of camels, etc., and have a real expertise in excellence for cloth and especially fabrics made of wool. And so this is where you realize that the bridges between the wine industry and the wine trade and the wine production and some of those very niche, high knowledge and know-how driven companies, how much bridge there is. I was talking to Mr. Brun and he said that there's when it comes to wool, there is an aspect of vintage. There's a vintage aspect to wool, depending on the year, on how fatty, how nutritious the grass was during the year. You will have a better or worse quality of wool. So typically, you need animals to actually grow to grow their layer of wool slower, which means a less rich vintage for furred will make a better quality of wool, which is something you would never think of approaching outside besides the spectrum of wine. Of course, we see it with our own eyes and it's with the eyes of our wine producers, which means our vision is probably partially biased, of course, but it's amazing the craftsmanship and the expertise of some small companies that you've never heard of, and we're trying to bring them to a greater audience and make them know.
That's fascinating. I will say this episode won't go live for 2 weeks if you want to unveil who won.
I promised I wouldn't.
Okay. Well, I think that's I love the story of the wool. Now I'm going to think about that every time I buy wool. I'll ask the lady at the store what vintage this wool is. But moving on now, can you talk a little bit? Let's dive into your family and your family's wines. Can you talk a little bit about where I guess for all of our listeners, let's zoom in. Where exactly is Alsace, and where in Alsace are you? And then we can dive into some of your specific wines and your history.
So Alsace is basically the centerpiece of Europe. If I had to put things in perspective for on your side of the Atlantic, World War I and World War II, that's because of us. We've been the prize for the winner of every war between France and Germany. And the reason for that is, amongst others, the amazing quality of the wines. We're in a place where wine, food, timber, and fresh water grows naturally. It's a little bit of a Garden of Eden, and we're lucky to be in a blessed wine region. So producing wines for over 2,000 years, and we're right on the border between France and Germany, which made viticulture a topic since the Romans settled. Basically, the Romans settled with the vine everywhere in Europe, and in our case, they brought the vine, which absolutely adored our climate. We don't have a Mediterranean climate, semi-continental, so we're a little bit further away from the ocean or from the sea, which means that we have cool climate in general. We have warm summers, cool winters, warmer days, cooler nights, and very, very suited for the production of white wine. So we're in an area that typically grows about 90% of whites, and essentially a set of grapes that we borrowed from Burgundy that we hosted from northern Italy, that we designed ourselves with our neighbors on the other side of the Rhine River, which is Riesling. So we have that set of Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris that are more Burgundian grapes, Burgundy born. We grow Riesling, we grow Sylvaner, we grow Gewürztraminer, which is really our autochthonous grape, and the one that really is the specialty with Rieslings, probably the specialty of the region. And we grow them in a style and profile that is absolutely unique in the world. The climates, the geology of Alsace is a unique set worldwide, and that makes us one of those niche, tiny wine regions that every wine lover should know.
Yeah, when I think of Alsace, I think of Riesling, Pinot Blanc, Gewürztraminer. What's the breakdown between the varieties that you just mentioned? Is it, you said that obviously Riesling stands out, but is it actually the most grown or no?
Actually, the most grown at the moment is Pinot Blanc. Would you be Pinot Blanc, the most grown grape? But accounting for the fact that now it's about 35%, 35 plus, almost 40% of the production of the region that is sparkling wines. And Pinot Blanc is the main base grape for the production of sparklings. So in terms of still wines, you probably more often find Riesling and Gewürztraminer, which are the two main plantings when it comes to the single varietal wines. But yes, Pinot Blanc badly planted. Pinot Noir is booming right now. We're a northern climate, especially for whites, but that also made Pinot Noir a very successful grape over the past decade or so. Climate change has really favored the production and leaning towards more and more of a production of red wines, and Pinot Noir being at the moment the main red grape variety in our region. This is the one that's getting all the light. But there are plantings of Terroir at the moment. There are plantings of we're grafting our first vineyard of Cabernet Franc next year. So it's part of an evolution. So it's a wine region in fast evolution at the moment, which makes it extremely interesting to follow, but very important to follow, because you can get lost very quickly. In 20 years, the wine region itself has seen an absolute revolution.
And the Cremant versus the still wines, the breakdown is it more
35, 65? So still the vast majority is still wine.
Okay.
Cremant it's actually gaining in fraction. It's double figure growth every year, so it grows fast.
That's amazing. Yeah. What maybe just could you speak a little bit about the culture of sparkling winemaking in the region, and maybe draw some comparisons to Champagne? I both have a very long history, and both have their pretty stark differences as well, even though similar method.
So I'm in a terrible position to speak about bubbles, because to that date we do not sell bubbles at Hugel. I can disclose this is about to change. In a month's time, we're gonna show our first. We're gonna release our first vintage of sparklings for the family.
Very nice.
That's one of the big projects for 2025, amongst others. Some of my neighbors would be better able to give you the full extent of the story, but let me go a little bit more in a shorter sense. I'll be able to condense it a little bit more easily. So Cremant really started and really caught on in Alsace in the 70s. This is when the first bubbles were being produced. Actually, in Rigvier, our neighbors at Dove were the instigators and the first producers of Cremant in the region. For the record, at some time they even make at some place in time they even made champagne. That would be a good story to ask them. And so the production started growing, but it's really only been for about a decade or two that we're seeing a real interest in increasing quality and producing quality levels that can actually rival with champagne. So the production method is the same in inspiration, meaning that it's a second fermentation in bubble, traditional method. So really much inspired by champagne for a good reason, and they're the best at it, and they still are, and they probably still will be for a long while. But we are in a wine region that is learning very, very fast, and it takes a bit of time to adapt to your climate, your grapes, etc. But I would say Alsace probably at that stage, besides champagne, produces the best sparkling in France, and also for the record, is the number one sparkling wine producer in France besides champagne. So we're a very popular option. We're a very popular non-champagne, and some cuvées in Alsace are really properly rivaling champagne that doubled the price at the moment, which is what probably is driving the growth. The fact that you can find very high quality at a price that is increasing, but that is still positioning it extremely well in the value chain.
What inspired you guys to finally make the plunge? Is it the ongoing global demand for sparkling, or was it just you guys really wanted to?
My cousin, who took over the winemaking this year and who's been with us since 2014, was born and raised in Champagne, about 50 meters from Paul Roger. So this was a strong inspiration. He did a viticulture school in Aviz, and most of his viticulture friends are from Champagne, producing bubbles. So it was a strong incentive and a high inspiration for him. And it's been the day he joined the company. I remembering talking to the rest of the family and telling our uncle who was the technical director and head of viticulture and enology. He told us, Mark, you know that the day you leave me in charge, I'll uproot your best vineyards of Riesling from Chernobyl. I'll plant some Chardonnay, right? So that was a great interest. Turns out we can actually do really, really well with our own grapes. Even not using Chardonnay, we're actually doing really well and actually using Riesling to a high extent for our first release. So our love for our grapes goes to the point where we can use a vast amount of our local grapes on our boat.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, we'll keep a lookout for that when it hits the market. But on the note of,
for the record, it's really good.
I believe you. So I wanted to pivot over now to your still wines, specifically to Riesling. We had Terry Thies on a while back, and he gave us a good breakdown of the difference between German and Austrian Rieslings, but didn't really touch on Alsace. So can you explain a little bit about your Riesling in particular and how Alsace maybe differs from some of your neighbors?
Mm-hmm. When you're taking a very broad approach to German Rieslings, typically there's a point where you're going to be talking about slate. Sorry, there's going to be at some point a start of a discussion about slate, whether it's Rheingau or Mosel, it's probably especially more Mosel, but you will be at some point talking about slates. Is a wine region that it's very different due to the fact that, first of all, it's not uniform. The geology of Alsace is probably the most complex in the world. So you cannot describe Alsace through one single soil type, through one single archetypical profile of wine. If I had to describe it and compare it a little bit to another wine region of Germany, that would be which more or less geologically is an extension of Alsace. I'm saying geologically because typically they're a little mad when I say they're just an extension of Alsace. But you will typically find in Alsace a case of riper Rieslings, warmer climates, still quite a dry climate, but really warmer, more sunny. Very few people know it even in France, but we're the sunniest, driest wine region of France besides Languedoc. So maybe Languedoc would be comparable, but we're really a dry region. We get about 600 million a year, which under American standards is about that much. Sorry, my metrics okay, my imperial is just nowhere. That would be about 2 feet. Let's say 2 feet. But that puts us in a situation that is very, very favorable for white wines. So really a white wine specialist, but with that extra touch of richness, right? The Germans always describe our wines as a little bit more crafty. They're a little bit heavier, denser. And that is probably also what made us for a long time the reference when it comes to dry wines. I would probably argue that it still is when it comes to dry Riesling. That is the standard. A Riesling in Alsace by default is dry. 99% of Rieslings produced in Alsace are dry. So if you've never had a dry Riesling in your life, look for the Alsace mention on the label. That will be a dry Riesling.
That's a great easy tip for our listeners, because the vast majority of wine drinkers just speak here in the States, think of Riesling and they think of something very, very sweet, because that's what we sell on the bottom shelf of our grocery store for sweet wines. But this is not that. Maybe plot by plot, or not plot by plot, label by label. I just pulled up to look at all of your different projects here. You can talk about like the classic, the estate, maybe go into some of the other modelings that you do of both Riesling and Gewürztraminer.
across the board, we're trying to have a range that is quite readable, but across our range, basically the idea is that you have two major styles of wines in the world: varietal wines, fruit forward, and varietally correct wines. And this is what we're trying to do with our classic wines. Classics are supposed to be a classic textbook example of a dry Riesling, a highly representative version of what Alsace produces. And by the way, our classic line is very often the first wine that someone is gonna taste, especially abroad. Someone's gonna taste from Alsace. We're very often seen as a little bit of the ambassadors of the region across multiple countries, actually across close to 100 countries now. And so this is supposed to be varietally correct and quite tasteful. And on the top end, on the top angle of the wine world, you have those tiny, small, little postcard-sized vineyards that produces great wines for centuries, that have been famous for centuries for producing great wines, that are worth probably 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 times what the neighboring blocks are. And this is what our Gros Syllois wines are. Our Gros Syllois, they're the heart of our best vineyards of the estate, in the heart of Alsace viticulture, on the fault line of Immobilier. It ticks every box: south-facing, barley soils, old vineyards, deep, dense soils that really go for high longevity, great terroir character, lots of personality. And yes, this is what our Gros Syllois wines there are. So we want those wines, and we make those wines, and we let them be born to be some of the finest wines in the world with the greatest longevity that they can last 30 or 40 years in the bottle. We drink vintages from the 70s and 60s at the moment in the family that are just starting their career, which is quite remarkable when you think about it, because typically the wines tend to survive the wines who made them in our family. And then you have a set of wines that are somewhere in the middle. They're not quite the best of the greatest terroir, but they're no longer varietal wines. And we have a range in between those two that is called the Estates, that actually defines this: wines with 10 to 15 years of aging potential, that have a lot of character, a lot of personality already, but just don't quite have the breeds to last for 100 years. And that give a lot of pleasure already to people that are expecting maybe a little bit more from a wine, that want to have an experience besides just a good drink. And Estate is a great quality level for that. So you can age it yourself if you wish. We typically put them to market at 4 years of age. And if you want to age it a little more, you can, and you'll get a little bit more for every year you're able to be patient.
In terms of the winemaking, does it vary for the higher end ones and the classic ones? Is it more like stainless at the beginning, and the other ones you keep just like large neutral like Foudre to maintain that terroir character?
The winemaking philosophy is exactly the same. In itself, we use neutral containers. We do very minimal lead aging. In itself, the winemaking is probably the least interesting part when it comes to what we do at Hugel. We're not trying to make magic. We hate makeup on wines. We're absolutely not trying to mask or hide anything from wines. So we're trying to be, I won't say minimalistic because it's unfair. We're actually quite technical when we need to be. And my uncle spends hours and hours and hours on those wines, but with the intention that what he does doesn't show on the wine in the end. And so that's really the approach across the range. There's a strong interest at the moment of non-intervention. You hear a lot about non-intervention in the winemaking at the moment. Not quite what we're trying to do. We're interventionists if we have to. But the idea is not that much to not intervene, but really to leave no trace. That's really the most important part of our winemaking. And then it's dictated by scale. Of course, you're not going to vinify a cuvée of 20, 30, 40,000 bottles the same way you would do it on a cuvée of 2, 3, 4,000 bottles. So food, there's small capacity. The average capacity of a food at Hugel is about 3,000 liters. So that would be something like 1,000 gallons or so, just under 1,000 gallons. So these would be small parcellar vinifications. And so, yeah, this would be really the main difference. Small batches, vinifying in small batches, blending after winemaking, keeping separate every entity or soil that we think is meaningful on the estate. This is really where the difference would be made. But This is just adapting to the origin of the grapes and the vineyards themselves. In itself, it's not a different winemaking.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about Gewürztraminer, something that I guess Americans probably don't see as much. And also, just can you talk about the different tiers all the way up to VDN too? I think that's a really cool classification as well.
Gewürztraminer, we follow our own classification from classic to estate to OCI. These are the of dry wines, let's say. Gewürztraminer is hardly ever dry, even at Hugel. We've always advocated for dry wines, and we've advocated for dry wines for a long time, but Gewürztraminer is a great variety that now is become very, very hard to vinify fully dry. So they're off dry, typically, our Gewürz, and really where they shine in our case and where they really outclass their great variety itself is on the sporen. We have one tiny piece of land, which is about 5.5 hectares, which is in the heart of the concrete sporen. Concrete sporen is about 23 hectares. And our real heart of the sporen is about 4 to 5 hectares. And this area will produce absolutely stunning wines. It's also in an off-dry style, but where it really, really shines is with late harvest. So this is an area where we do produce late harvest, where we get botrytis on a regular basis. Regular basis for us would be about every 2 or 3 years. We have a quality crop of late harvest wines, quality potential for late harvest wines. We have botrytis that settles. We have nice dehydration of the grapes, and we're able to produce noble rot and botrytis wines. And this has been an absolute specialty of our family. We're behind the appellation law for those wines in the region. So we've really been instrumental in putting together the appellation law for late harvest wines in the region. Always been a specialty of the family. It's some of our most sought after wines. It's also some of the longest lived. We have a library that dates back to the middle of the 19th century with those wines. Amongst others, 1865, 1888 are some of the greatest wines of the cellar. They're practically indestructible, and this is what drives our imagination in the family. It's our lifeline. It's our generational link in the family. We're fortunate to have a library that's hopefully going to outlive us. We're fortunate to have a library where our ancestors, the previous generations, have cellared wines for us to remember them, to drink, to enjoy ourselves, but especially to remember them. And it's a very strong part of our family culture and our family history. And this is, I think, where family companies have a little bit of something different from other companies, as we were discussing previously with PFV and what sets family companies apart. We don't only make wines to sell. I would actually even put it the other way around. First of all, we make wines for ourselves to drink, and we make wines we like and we want to drink. And it's a matter of, it's a little bit of a matter of pride. When you're in a family company like ours, you do not want to be the one that puts a lesser quality than the previous generation in the cellar. It's a mark of your heritage. The wines you make are pretty much what defines us as people. And in our case, in my case, I have a 4-year-old son who is starting to sell some wines. He was born in 2021. So we did make a straw wine for him because it wasn't a year for botrytis. So we did make a straw wine so that he would also have wines that outlives him. And yes, well, my father passed away in 2016. My father took his life in 2016. So my son, unfortunately, won't ever have a chance to meet his grandfather. But the wines are already there. The wines he made, the wines that my father's and my uncle's generation made, they sell it now. And this will be the link between my father and my son. It will be the wines that are in that library and that are all of the great vintages of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s.
So that sort of, that's the mark of your family, the botrytis wines. Is that throughout the region, how prevalent in terms of each family in making wines of that style? Yeah, very small.
It's really the icing of the cake.
Uh-huh.
Even for us, late harvest wines produced maybe 1% of the production. So it's a very, very small but beautiful icing on the cake. And then sometimes you get the sprinkles and the cherry. That's the sélection de Grenoble and sélection de Grenoble. It's really not what define what It's part of what defines us, but it's definitely not something that we count on. It's an act of nature. It's if you're lucky, if you're a believer, it's an act of God. It's an act of nature. Whatever you believe in, you're thanking your luck to be able to produce those wines, because we would never produce it just to produce it. If we're making an SGN or a VT, it needs to be outstanding. It needs to knock our socks off. Even us, we need to be amazed by this wine. So it's really the icing on the beautiful cake. Typically, if you have a nice, beautiful, sound, ripe harvest, then you can think about producing some botrytis. Some very sound harvests won't have botrytis. Some crappy harvest at some stage and some really difficult harvest will have, for God knows what reason, it happened to you get 3 days of perfect weather condition, and you realize you have that one tiny little vineyard that just pick it now because it's going to rain in another half day, and you're just like 2013. 2013, we made an amazing Riesling VT in conditions that were really, really difficult. And it's the wine of the vintage, and it's the wine that we're going to remember, that is going to make us remember that vintage as, wow, actually, what meant that?
Can you briefly share the difference between a vintage tardive and the Sélection de Grand Nobles?
Yeah, it's a matter of concentration. So strictly speaking, it's a matter of concentration. So sugar at harvest, in effect, the way you're going to get that sugar is going to vary between the Vendange tardive and the Sélection de Grand Nobles. So specific to Hugel, but for us, Vendange tardive always have some degree of, but for us, they're not overripe wines, they're concentration wines already. The difference is that for Vendange tardive, you'll have maybe 20, 30, 40% botrytis maximum, with a variety of concentration that can be from small spread, high concentration, to widespread, low concentration. And then Sélection de Grand Nobles is going to be only botrytis. So Sélection de Grand Nobles, it's always, for us especially, selective tray, 100% botrytis. Go through your vineyards once, twice, 3 times sometimes. We've done some wines that we've done over 3 trays of botrytis, and sometimes we keep them separate. We kept them separate. So it's really a botrytis selection. Sélection de Grand Nobles, it's berry by berry. Sometimes if you're lucky, half bunches. Sometimes if you're in the luck of the century, you can pick bunches of 100% botrytis. That happens once in a generation or once in a century sometimes. But yes, Sélection de Grand Nobles, they are high concentration, pure botrytis wines with residual sugars that are, the sky's the limit at that stage. Sometimes we fermented wines we didn't even think would ferment because they had reached what we call in the family jam point. If it's more than 50% sugar, that it's not technically supposed to ferment, because the yeast don't have enough water to stay hydrated when they ferment. So once in a while, you will have absolute monster. And sometimes you will have wines that you didn't expect much from that will amaze you. So that's really what botrytis brings to a wine. It brings an extra layer of opportunity and complexity. And by complexity, I mean botrytis adds a layer to the equation of what makes a great wine. It's adding an option. It's adding, yes, you have the place, you have the ripeness, you have the soundness, etc., etc. You add botrytis on top, it's an extra factor that can make a great wine.
When you sort of dig in this question a bit here as we get to wrap up, this will maybe be one of the last 1 or 2 questions, but think about in your mind how, obviously your family has been around for so long, been making wine for so long, have an extensive cellar, and I'm sure that there may be aspects of your portfolio where you think, hey, we're at the top, we want to keep beating what we've done previously, and you mentioned that a little bit, but is there producers or just regions, styles of wines, other places in the world where you think, oh, if our sweet wines could take some of this here and some of that there and rise to that level, what are some other places maybe that you look to for that inspiration, both in Riesling and with the sweet Gewürztraminers and across your portfolio?
To me, the greatest sweet wines in the world are produced in Tokai, are produced in Germany, are produced in Vouvray and in Alsace. These are the four wine regions that to me produce the great sweet wines of the world. And Vouvray, let's say without exceptions, the Greater Loire Valley to some extent. It's interesting to see what kind of inspiration you're looking for. My uncle did one of his first internships and harvest in Australia. and of the wines were produced under temperature control down there, and down under, I should say. And this did not exist in Alsace. So first thing he did when he arrived was to experiment and do something, just tweak something to be able to temperature control one cask in the cellar, and it absolutely skyrocketed the quality of our Gewürztraminers. Especially Gewürztraminer is a great variety that used to potentially ferment overnight. Mark told me a story of one of his Gewürztraminers in the 80s. You go to bed, you just did your density, you go to bed, the wine's starting to ferment nicely. You go, okay, good. We'll check that tomorrow morning, and in the morning everything has overflown everywhere, and the wine is finished. 14% of alcohol down. The wine is done. And this used to happen with Gewürztraminer. So being able to master this and cool down the temperatures, slow down a little bit the fermentation he's really had a big influence on Gewürztraminer. So this is the kind of influences you can have. Burgundy, of course, is a big influence when it comes to the Pinot Noirs, but influence this is a topic that is actually bugging me quite a bit in the fact that very often people think inspiring yourself of a wine region or a product or it's just trying to do the same. We're not trying to do the same, and this is what even producers sometimes in the region have a hard time understanding. We're not producing Alsace Pinot Noir to produce Burgundy. We want to produce our own, and we're trying to really leave a lot of space for our terroir, our character, the personality of our grapes to extract. Pinot Noir in Alsace typically has higher acidity. We're a cooler climate, so we extract less. We're looking for that acidity driven and structure driven through acidity character. And yes, and champagne, of course, inspires us when it comes to bubbles. And that's why it's so important to taste one of our returns. He will recognize himself if he sees that. But he says he's been to a lunch with my uncle and was amazed with the kind of bottles that were on the table. My uncle Mark opens one great bottle of wine a day, and tastes it, drinks it, sometimes finishes it in the day after. But he opens one great bottle of wine a day or every couple of days. And his answer was simple. He says, it takes great wines to make great wines. You have to drink great wines to make great wines. And it's very important. And yes, tasting is comparing. And if you're tasting your wines and comparing them with your neighbors, you're going to do okay.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good perspective.
That's the great news, guys. If you don't know anything about wine, this is the best part. The only way you can know more is take a bottle and open it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. All right. That was our interview with Jean-Frédéric Hugel. I hope everybody learned a bit more about Alsatian wines as well as their new sparkling project. And again, as Brady mentioned, if you want to learn a little bit more about the projects they have in the works or vintages to drink right now, go check out our 5 Questions with a Winemaker episode with him as well. But for now, that is our episode for this week, and we'll be back with another episode next week. Cheers.